Imagine hiking deep into the Oregon mountains, the storm rolling in, the forest turning darker with every step. A former Marine and his loyal German Shepherd search for shelter until the dog suddenly freezes. His ears go up, he growls. Something is in the woods. Jack pushes through the thick branches, and there it is, a cabin, old, silent, but not abandoned. Inside, everything is strangely clean. Fresh firewood, a warm blanket, and on the table, an open journal with a woman's handwriting, mentioning a name, Emily, and a warning, and something she left behind in the forest. Jack about to uncover a mother's desperate secret, a child in danger, and a man dangerous enough to hunt her across the wilderness. What they discover inside that hidden cabin will lead to a fight for survival and a miracle no one saw coming. If you want to know the truth behind the photo, the necklace, and the footsteps in the dark, stay with this story. And if you enjoy emotional, inspirational stories like this, please consider subscribing to the channel. It truly helps us grow. Thank you so much for being here, and may God bless you. The early autumn sky over eastern Oregon had shifted into an unsettling steel-gray blanket, heavy and full of warning. Cold mountain wind swept down from the Blue Mountains, cutting sharply through the towering Douglas firs, while scattered leaves spiraled across the forest floor. Hours earlier, the woods had been calm and warm beneath gentle sunlight, but now the mist crawled in from between the trunks, thickening each minute. The lush greenery of the Pacific Northwest quickly transformed into a darker, harsher landscape, where visibility narrowed and shadows deepened. The air smelled of rain and damp soil, and the quiet rhythm of nature slowly turned into the tense prelude of an approaching storm. Jack Miller moved steadily along a narrowing trail as the temperature dropped. At 38 years old, Jack possessed the rugged, disciplined appearance of a man shaped by years in the Marine Corps. He had a lean but powerful build, broad shoulders hardened from carrying military packs and hiking gear through difficult terrains. His jawline was strong, roughened by a few days of stubble, while his short, dark blonde hair peeked from under a worn cap. His blue eyes carried a distant, guarded intensity, an emotional residue from a mission in Afghanistan years ago, during which two close friends were lost in an ambush. The trauma had carved a quiet heaviness into him, making him reserved with strangers, yet fiercely loyal to those he cared about. Jack's calm demeanor and slow, steady breathing revealed a man who had learned to adapt to chaos rather than fear it. Beside him trotted Ranger, his 5-year-old German Shepherd with thick black and tan fur and sharp, intelligent amber eyes. Ranger's muscular frame moved with confidence and trained precision, every step alert yet smooth. He had originally been raised for search and rescue work and had accompanied Jack on countless hiking trips since puppyhood. Ranger's keen senses and steadfast loyalty made him the perfect companion. He often glanced back at Jack as though checking on him, and Jack always gave a small nod in return. Their bond was unspoken but deeply rooted. Ranger had helped fill the silence left by the people Jack once lost. A sharp gust of wind shook the trees, followed by a low rumble of thunder rolling across the sky. Raindrops began to fall, slow and sparse at first, then quickly transformed into a steady downpour. The forest darkened as heavy clouds smothered the light, turning midday into something closer to dusk. The once solid hiking trail softened into mud under their boots, and puddles formed rapidly. Jack tightened the straps of his pack and looked ahead, squinting through the curtain of rain. "We need to find shelter, buddy," he murmured, his voice low but calm. Ranger lifted his ears at the sound, letting out a soft bark that echoed faintly through the woods before continuing forward. Jack unfolded a damp map from his pocket but quickly put it away. Visibility was too low, and the rain was smudging the ink. Instead, he relied on instinct and experience, leading Ranger off the main trail in hopes of finding natural cover. Fallen logs, boulders, and clusters of thick pine offered some protection from the wind, but not enough to keep them dry. The forest grew denser as they walked, the smell of wet bark and moss stronger than before. Each step sank slightly into the softened ground. Minutes stretched into nearly an hour, and the storm only worsened. Jack's jacket clung to him, soaked, while Ranger shook water from his fur every few minutes. The temperature continued to drop, and Jack knew they needed something better than a tree canopy before nightfall. The last thing he wanted was for Ranger to suffer in the cold. Just as he was considering turning back toward a rock formation they passed earlier, Ranger suddenly stiffened. The dog's ears perked sharply, tail rising as he sniffed vigorously at the air. Jack stopped immediately. He had learned long ago to trust Ranger's reactions more than maps or equipment. "What is it?" Jack asked softly. Ranger let out a low whine and moved a few steps forward, nose pressed close to the ground. He traced an invisible path through wet ferns and mud. Jack followed quietly as Ranger guided him off the faint trail and deeper into an overgrown area where tall grass and shrubs hid much of the terrain. The moment they pushed through a cluster of thick brush, Jack noticed something unusual. A narrow path, barely visible, almost entirely swallowed by vegetation. It looked old, long abandoned, the kind of trail that nature had tried to erase. Moss clung to rocks, and tangled roots crossed the path in uneven lines. But what caught Jack's attention was that despite the overgrowth, the path itself had a faint but distinct shape, as though somebody had once walked it frequently. "Good boy," Jack whispered, realizing what Ranger had found. They followed the forgotten path as it curved deeper into the forest. The rain didn't let up, but the trees here grew closer together, forming a natural shield overhead that softened the downpour. Ranger walked ahead confidently, occasionally glancing back to ensure Jack was still following. After several minutes, the trees parted, revealing a small clearing hidden away from the main woods. Jack stopped in his tracks as he took in the sight before him. There, nestled between towering pines, stood an old wooden cabin. Its structure was weathered but surprisingly intact. The roof, though covered in layers of wet pine needles, appeared sturdy. The windows, though dusty and fogged from the storm, were unbroken. A narrow porch extended from the front, and on it sat a wooden chair that looked recently used, the shine of its surface not yet dulled by time. Smoke stains marked the chimney, faint but visible, signs that someone may have lit a fire not too long ago. Jack felt a sudden tension mixed with curiosity. The cabin looked abandoned at first glance, yet nothing about it felt truly deserted. Ranger stood close to Jack, tail down but not tucked, sensing something unusual but not dangerous. Jack exhaled slowly. This wasn't on any map. The forest around them seemed quiet, as if waiting. Jack took one cautious step forward, Ranger at his side, and that was how, while seeking shelter from a storm, Jack Miller and his loyal German shepherd discovered an old wooden house hidden deep within the Oregon wilderness, a house that clearly showed signs of recent use, even though the area around it was completely silent and void of people. Jack approached the wooden cabin cautiously, the sound of rain hitting the roof like thousands of small drumming fingers. Ranger stayed slightly ahead, nose twitching as he surveyed the porch. Jack placed his hand on the doorknob, expecting resistance, but the door swung open easily with a soft creak. Inside, the air carried the faint scent of pine, smoke, and something else. Something human. Jack stepped through the doorway, scanning the dim interior while Ranger circled behind him. The cabin was unexpectedly well maintained. Instead of the broken furniture or dusty floors typical of abandoned structures, this one looked like someone had cared for it. The wooden floorboards were worn but clean. A coat rack stood in the corner with an old green flannel hanging from it. To the left, a small fireplace held a pile of freshly chopped firewood, its cut edges bright and pale, clearly split only a short time ago. Jack crouched beside it, brushing his fingers across the surfaces. "Whoever stayed here wasn't gone long," he muttered. Ranger sniffed the logs as well, then moved toward a small wooden table at the opposite side of the room. His tail lowered but didn't tuck. He wasn't afraid, but something unsettled him. Jack followed the dog's gaze and saw the open journal lying on the table, its pages slightly wrinkled from humidity. He approached slowly. The journal had a simple leather cover, worn at the edges as though handled frequently. Handwritten lines filled each page with neat, slanted handwriting. Jack felt a strange hesitation, as if opening the journal meant crossing into someone's private world, but the circumstances gave him little choice. He read the first visible lines. "I hope Emily finds the courage to return. She didn't deserve any of this. If anything happens, someone will need to know what she left behind in the forest." Jack's brows tightened. The name Emily appeared several times in the next lines, always written with a mixture of concern and urgency. There was no last name, no clear explanation of what she left or where exactly. Only fragments, the clearing, the old stump, north of the creek. It was enough to stir Jack's curiosity, but not enough to give him answers. He turned the page and noticed a dried smear of mud near the bottom corner. Someone might have rushed to write this. Ranger let out a low whine, prompting Jack to glance around the cabin once more for any clues. There was only one other room, a small bedroom with a single cot neatly made. A folded blanket rested at the foot of the bed. On the wall hung a faded photograph of a forest path, though the colors were washed out by sunlight. No suitcases, no personal belongings, no food supplies, only signs of temporary use. Jack's military instincts kicked in. This was not a place someone lived in permanently. It was a place someone returned to occasionally, or used in secret. A sudden sharp bark from Ranger pulled Jack out of his thoughts. The dog stood near the window, staring outside with ears fully raised. Jack moved beside him, wiping condensation from the glass. The storm had not let up. The rain fell in thick sheets, obscuring most of the forest. But Ranger's posture was unmistakable. He sensed something moving out there. Jack extinguished his flashlight and stepped away from the window, not wanting to cast a glow that could reveal their presence. He listened carefully, but all he heard was the relentless rain. Ranger eventually backed away from the window, but he kept glancing toward it, as if expecting the movement to return. As dusk settled, Jack prepared a small fire in the fireplace. The warmth helped dry his jacket and Ranger's fur, though the dog remained alert, lying facing the door with his chin on his paws. Jack sat at the table again, rereading the journal entries. The words "left behind in the forest" repeated in his mind. What had Emily left? And why did the writer believe she might never return for it? By the time darkness fully fell, the storm had grown heavier. Wind battered the cabin walls, and branches scraped against the roof like claws. Jack closed the journal and leaned back, letting the fire crackle softly. Ranger's ears twitched. Then came the sound, a faint crunch outside the cabin, a footstep. Jack's training responded instantly. He froze, holding his breath. Ranger stood slowly, muscles tense, eyes fixed on the door. Another step followed, a soft, deliberate shift of weight on wet soil. Someone was walking near the cabin. Jack glanced at Ranger. The dog didn't bark, which meant whoever was outside wasn't close enough to trigger full alarm, but close enough to stir unease. Jack reached for the small hatchet by the fireplace. Not his first choice compared to a firearm, but the best available. He moved silently to the window and peeked through the corner. Nothing. Only rain pouring down in thick curtains and the trembling silhouettes of pine branches. But the footsteps had been real. Jack stepped back, gripping the hatchet tightly as another faint sound echoed around the cabin. This time behind it, near the trees. Someone, or something, was circling the house. Jack lowered his voice to a whisper. "Stay close, Ranger." The dog pressed against his leg, ears locked forward. They waited, listening, the firelight flickering across the walls. But no one knocked. No one tried to enter. Instead, only silence returned, swallowing the forest once again. And that was when Jack realized whoever had been there didn't want to confront them. They only wanted to make their presence known. Morning arrived slowly, filtered through gray clouds left behind by the night's storm. The forest outside the cabin glistened with moisture, raindrops clinging to pine needles like tiny beads of glass. Jack stretched his sore shoulders and glanced at Ranger, who was already awake, standing alert near the door, as if still listening for the footsteps from the night before. The fire in the hearth had died down to warm embers, casting a soft orange glow across the wooden floor. Jack walked to the table where the journal still lay open. As he turned its pages carefully, he noticed something he hadn't seen the night before, a thin piece of worn paper pressed between two entries. He slid it out and discovered that it wasn't just paper, but a small hand-drawn map. Its edges were yellowed, the lines sketched with dark pencil strokes. A tiny X was marked near the bottom corner, about 2 or 3 miles from the cabin based on the rough scale drawn in the corner. Someone had creased the map many times, as though it had been opened and closed repeatedly, maybe in worry or hesitation. Jack studied it closely, tracing the path with his thumb. It showed a creek, a bend in the forest, and a clearing. Everything about it looked intentional, not random, and definitely connected to Emily, the mysterious woman mentioned in the journal. Ranger sniffed the paper, then sneezed softly before looking expectantly toward the door. Jack gave a faint smile. "You want to go, don't you?" Ranger's tail moved once in response. Jack packed lightly. A knife, a small hatchet, a metal flask, a length of rope, and the map. The air was cold, but calmer than last night's chaos. As they stepped outside, pine needles crunched under their boots, and the forest smelled strongly of wet earth. Ranger led the way with ears high, following the direction indicated on the map. The first mile was easy. The forest canopy opened slightly, letting in muted morning light. Birds called intermittently from above, seemingly unconcerned about the previous night's disturbances. Jack remained alert, scanning his surroundings for any sign that someone might be watching, but the woods felt empty and still. Ranger paused occasionally to sniff trees, roots, and patches of earth, as though checking for any unfamiliar scents. As they crossed a shallow creek, the same one sketched on the map, Jack noticed a broken branch leaning at an unnatural angle. It looked human-made, perhaps used as a marker. Further ahead, the ground was disturbed, leaves displaced in a pattern that suggested recent foot traffic, but not by many people, likely just one. After another half-mile, the forest began to change. The trees grew denser and the air cooler. Moss covered fallen logs like a green blanket. Ranger's nose twitched faster. He quickened his pace, pulling slightly ahead. Jack gripped the map as the clearing came into view exactly where it was marked. The clearing was small, almost circular, surrounded by a ring of old fir trees. In the center, the soil appeared tampered with, darker and more loosely packed than the surrounding dirt. Ranger walked straight toward it, sniffing intensely and pawing at the ground. Jack knelt beside him. Something's buried here. He used his hatchet to gently break the surface, pushing aside damp soil. It didn't take long. Whatever was hidden had been buried only a few inches deep. A wooden box emerged, small enough to fit in both of Jack's hands. Time had darkened its surface, but the wood was solid, carved with swirling lines that looked handmade. Jack lifted it carefully and opened the lid. Inside lay 3 items. The first was a photograph of a child, a boy, maybe 5 or 6 years old, with sandy brown hair, bright eyes, and a shy smile. His cheeks were round with youth, and he wore a small jacket that looked slightly too big for him. Jack felt a quiet heaviness settle in his chest. Children's photos carried a different type of weight. Next to it was a silver necklace. The pendant was a small, oval-shaped charm engraved with a simple flower. The metal was slightly tarnished, but the design remained clear, delicate, and meaningful. Jack turned it over in his fingers. It was the kind of necklace someone would never discard willingly. The last item was a folded piece of paper. Jack opened it slowly. The writing was small, hurried, and slightly smudged from moisture. Please take this to where it belongs. No name, no instructions, no explanation. Just that one pleading sentence. Jack exhaled, staring at the message. Ranger nudged the box as if urging him to understand. Jack's mind pieced together the fragments. Emily's name in the journal, the urgency of the handwriting, the fear hinted between the lines. This was no criminal hideout, no dangerous cabin used by hunters or fugitives. It was the kind of place someone used to hide something precious. A mother, maybe. Someone running from something. Someone desperate. The footsteps from the previous night replayed in Jack's mind. Whoever had been watching the cabin could have been guarding the secret, or searching for it. Jack closed the box gently. This wasn't left by someone dangerous, he whispered. This was left by someone trying to protect what mattered. Ranger pressed closer to him, sensing the shift in Jack's tone. Jack stood, holding the box against his chest. He now understood. The cabin wasn't a trap. It was a breadcrumb. A silent trail left by someone who feared she might never return. Jack moved quickly through the damp forest path with the wooden box secured in his pack. The air smelled of rain-soaked bark, and the sky hung low with pale clouds. Ranger trotted beside him, ears twitching at the slightest shift in the wind. The discovery of the child's picture and the silver necklace weighed heavily on Jack's mind, each step carrying the unspoken question. Who was Emily, and what had she been running from? By the time the cabin came into view again, the sun had dipped behind the ridge, casting long shadows over the clearing. The wooden structure looked unchanged from when Jack left it that morning, quiet and motionless. But Ranger froze at the edge of the clearing. His body stiffened, tail straight, nose pointed directly toward the cabin door. Jack instinctively reached for the handle of his hatchet. "Someone's here," he whispered. Ranger growled, low, controlled, the kind of warning he gave when something was undeniably wrong. Jack stepped forward slowly, his boots pressing softly into the damp soil. Just as he reached the porch, a figure burst from the side of the cabin, moving with desperate speed. Before Jack could react, a force slammed into him, pinning him against the wooden wall. A cold blade pressed lightly against his ribs. "Don't move," a woman's voice hissed, shaky, breathless, but firm with fear. Ranger barked sharply and lunged forward, but Jack raised a hand to stop him. He could feel the woman trembling against him. She wasn't attacking with confidence. She was reacting out of sheer panic. "Emily?" Jack said quietly. The woman froze. Her grip loosened for a fraction of a second. "How do you know that name?" she demanded. Jack slowly lifted his hands. "Your journal, and what you left in the forest." Silence stretched between them as she processed his words. Finally, she stepped back, lowering the knife. Ranger stopped growling, though his eyes stayed fixed on her, analyzing her every movement. Emily stepped into the fading light, revealing the weary figure behind the instinctive attack. She appeared to be in her early 30s, with long, dark brown hair matted slightly from rain, falling in tangled waves around her shoulders. Her skin was pale, almost too pale, as though she had spent more nights hiding than resting. Large hazel eyes stared at Jack, sharp, tired, and rimmed with faint dark circles that revealed many sleepless nights. She was slender but strong, with the tense posture of someone always prepared to run. Her clothes were simple: a worn gray sweater, dark jeans, and boots splattered with dried mud. Her hands shook slightly as she slid the knife into her coat pocket. "I thought you were him," she said quietly. "The man I've been running from." Jack's voice softened. "Who is he?" Emily exhaled slowly, shoulders sinking. "A man named Victor Hale. He used to be close to my family, someone we trusted. But when my husband died, Hale started showing up uninvited. He became obsessed with controlling everything, my finances, my life, even my son. When I refused, he threatened to take my boy from me." Her lips trembled for a moment before she steadied them. "So I left." Her voice carried a weight that told Jack she wasn't exaggerating. He had met men like Hale before, men intoxicated by power, who believed ownership was the same as love. Jack nodded. "The child in the picture, he's your son?" Emily nodded. "His name is Liam, 6 years old. He has sandy hair like his father." A slight, bittersweet smile flickered across her face. "He's safe now, with someone I trust far more than myself." Jack removed the wooden box from his pack and placed it on the porch railing. Emily's breath caught the moment she saw it. She opened it slowly, her fingers brushing the necklace with painful tenderness. "I buried these in case Hale ever found me," she whispered. "If something happened to me, someone, anyone kind enough, might find them and know the truth." Jack's expression shifted. "You thought no one would help you." Emily met his eyes, and for a second Jack saw the depth of her isolation. People don't usually help women running from powerful men. Her voice was small, almost fading. Jack shook his head. "Ranger and I aren't walking away." Ranger stepped closer to Emily, sniffed her carefully, then gave a soft huff of acknowledgement. It made her smile faintly for the first time. But the moment of calm shattered when Ranger's ears shot upward, his entire body turning rigid. A split second later, Jack heard it too, the distinct crack of a branch near the tree line. Someone was there. Emily's face drained of color. "He found me." Jack moved in front of her instinctively. Ranger growled, deeper than before, the sound vibrating through the clearing. As the last light of day slipped behind the mountains, the forest seemed to close in around the cabin. More footsteps crunched through the underbrush, slow, deliberate, and far too close. The night had barely begun, and already the cabin was under threat. The forest had grown unnervingly silent, as though every creature sensed the danger creeping closer to the cabin. Jack positioned himself in front of Emily, while Ranger stood low and tense, his fur bristling along his spine. The crunch of approaching footsteps grew louder, each one deliberate and slow. Jack could tell the man wasn't trying to hide. He wanted them to hear him coming, wanted them afraid. A silhouette appeared between the trees. As the shadow stepped into the clearing, Jack saw a tall man with a thick frame and broad shoulders, dressed in a dark, weatherproof jacket. His movements were smooth, almost too controlled. When he emerged fully into the fading light, Jack finally saw his face. Victor Hale. He looked to be in his early 40s, with slicked-back black hair that shone with the wetness of the forest air. His jaw was sharp, clean-shaven, and his features were strong but hardened by arrogance. His brown eyes carried a cold dominance, the kind of gaze belonging to men who believed the world should bend to them. He walked with the confidence of someone who had never truly been denied anything. But beneath his calm tone when he spoke, Jack sensed something volatile, an entitlement mixed with obsession. "Emily," Victor said, spreading his arms as if greeting an old friend, "you've made this much harder than it needed to be." Emily took a step back, her voice trembling. "Stay away from me." Victor smirked. "You ran. You hid. But you knew I would always find you." Jack stepped forward. "This ends tonight." Victor's eyes flicked to Jack, studying him with faint irritation. "And who are you? Another fool she manipulated to protect her?" His lip curled with contempt. "I should have expected this." Jack didn't flinch. "Walk away, Hale." Victor's expression darkened, a crack in his carefully maintained composure. "I don't walk away from what's mine." Before Victor could reach for anything in his jacket, Ranger lunged with a deep, menacing growl. Victor stumbled back, startled, and Jack seized the opening. He tackled Victor to the ground, pinning his forearm against the man's chest. Victor swung wildly, strength fueled by anger, but Jack blocked the blow and forced his wrist down. Ranger stayed beside Jack, teeth bared, ready to strike. Victor thrashed beneath him. "You don't know who you're dealing with." Jack's voice was steady, unshaken. "A man who threatens women and children? I know exactly who you are." Victor tried to reach for his pocket. Jack slammed his arm into the dirt, knocking the breath out of him. The fight was rough, full of adrenaline and desperation. Finally, Jack managed to subdue him, pinning both of Victor's hands with practiced precision. Ranger stood guard, emitting a low growl that froze any attempt Victor made at resisting. Emily, trembling but determined, used Jack's phone to call the authorities. Within an hour, police arrived, 2 officers who handled Victor with the caution reserved for dangerous individuals. They described themselves briefly. Officer Reed, a tall man with a trimmed beard and calm voice, and Officer Matthews, a shorter woman with sharp eyes and a steady, reassuring tone. They thanked Jack after reviewing the situation and assured Emily that Victor would not find her again. When Victor was taken away in handcuffs, Emily finally let out a breath she had been holding for months. The officers offered to escort Emily to where her son, Liam, had been staying. Jack and Ranger joined her. The drive was quiet, heavy with anticipation. until they reached a small two-story house nestled near a quiet suburban street. Warm lights glowed from inside, the kind of peaceful home untouched by the chaos of the forest. When the door opened, a boy with sandy brown hair and round, gentle features peeked out. About 7 years old, he had bright hazel eyes that mirrored his mother's. The moment he saw her, he ran forward and threw his arms around her waist, burying his face in her sweater. "Mom, you came back!" Emily knelt, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm here, sweetheart. I'm here." Ranger, tail wagging furiously, circled them, sniffing the boy's hands and face before nudging him affectionately. Liam giggled, instantly comforted. Jack stepped back slightly, giving them space. When Liam finally noticed him, he hesitated shyly. Jack crouched down and offered a gentle smile. "Your mom's very brave." Liam nodded slowly, still clinging to Emily. Jack reached out to ruffle the boy's hair, and Liam leaned into the touch, no longer afraid. Emily looked at Jack with soft gratitude. "You saved us. I wished someone kind would find the clues I left. I just never thought it would actually happen." Jack lowered his gaze humbly. "You did what you had to do. You protected your son." Later that night, the three returned to the cabin. No longer a place of fear, but a symbol of survival. Jack repaired the porch steps while Ranger and Liam played nearby, the boys' laughter echoing between the trees. Emily stood on the steps, watching them with a look of peace she hadn't worn in years. The forest that once held her fear now held something new: safety, warmth, and the beginning of a family she had never expected to find. There are moments in life when darkness feels overwhelming, when fear becomes heavier than our strength, and when running seems easier than hoping. But stories like Emily's remind us that even in the deepest forest, even in the coldest night, God can send help in the most unexpected forms. A kind stranger, a loyal dog, or a single moment of courage that changes everything. Some may call it luck, some may call it coincidence, but many of us know it is grace, it is protection. It is the quiet hand of God guiding us home. Jack did not arrive at that cabin by accident. Ranger did not sense danger by chance. Emily did not leave those clues without purpose. When the world turns dark, God often works through people. People who choose kindness, people who step in, people who listen to the voice inside that tells them to do what is right. And in our daily lives, we often forget that small acts matter. A gentle word can save a broken spirit. A helping hand can change a destiny. A stranger's kindness can become someone's miracle. So as you finish this story, may you remember that no matter where you are, no matter how heavy life feels, you are not alone. God still moves, still protects, and still sends His angels in the form of people around us. If this story touched your heart, please share it with a friend. You never know who might need a little hope today. Leave a comment and tell us where you're watching from, or share a moment when kindness changed your life. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next story of faith, love, and unbelievable miracles. And may God bless you, protect your family, and guide your steps today, tomorrow, and always. Amen.